The divine deception. The day the Zephyrians arrived, the sky itself seemed to weep. Their ships descended through storm clouds like falling stars, each vessel a masterpiece of flowing metal that seemed to bend light around its edges. They didn't crash land or request permission to dock. They simply appeared above Earth's major cities, floating in perfect silence. Waiting, Captain Elena Vasquez remembered watching the news feeds from her underground bunker in the Colorado Rockies. She had been preparing for this moment for 5 years, ever since the first radio signals from deep space had been detected. But nothing could have prepared humanity for what came next. The Zephyrians spoke through every electronic device on Earth simultaneously. Their voices were beautiful, melodious, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in human bones. They introduced themselves as the children of the eternal cosmos, beings who had transcended mortality eons ago. They claimed to be the gardeners of the galaxy, and Earth was their latest harvest. "We are your creators," returned their leader announced, his image appearing on every screen worldwide. Zeph Commander Kix stood nearly 8 feet tall, his skin shimmering with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. His eyes were pools of liquid silver, and when he moved, reality seemed to bend around him. "You have grown beyond our expectations, little ones. Now it is time to take your place in the divine order." Within hours, demonstrations began. Ships lifted entire mountains and moved them across continents. They turned deserts into lush gardens with a gesture. They healed terminal patients by simply touching them. To most of humanity, it looked like magic. To Captain Vasquez, it looked like very advanced technology being used to create a specific psychological effect. The world's governments fell in line quickly. Presidents and prime ministers knelt before holographic projections of Zeph Kix, offering their nations as tribute. Religious leaders declared the arrival as the return of ancient prophecies. The military stood down worldwide, their weapons deemed useless against beings who could manipulate matter at the molecular level. But not everyone believed. Dr. Marcus Chen had been studying xenobiology for 15 years, preparing for this moment. When the Zephyrians began their miracles, he noticed something others missed. The energy signatures were consistent with quantum manipulation technology, theoretical but possible. The healing wasn't divine intervention, it was advanced nanotechnology. The landscape changes used gravitational field generators. "They're not gods," Dr. Chen told Captain Vasquez during their first underground meeting. "They're just really advanced. But advanced doesn't mean invincible." Captain Vasquez had assembled her resistance from the remains of Earth's military forces. Men and women who had refused to kneel, who had gone underground rather than submit to the Zephyrian divine order. They called themselves the Prometheus Project, after the mythological figure who stole fire from the gods. The resistance operated from abandoned military installations, using hardened communication systems that the Zephyrians seemed unable to monitor. It took months of careful observation before they understood why. The aliens' technology was so advanced that they had never developed defenses against primitive electromagnetic signals. They were looking for quantum communications and missing the radio waves entirely. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was the first to make contact with a Zephyrian patrol. His F-35 fighter had been modified with experimental stealth technology, making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. When he intercepted a lone Zephyrian scout ship over the Pacific, something unexpected happened. "Captain, you're not going to believe this." Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system. "I just watched their pilot make a mistake. He tried to dodge my missile lock and overcorrected. These guys aren't perfect. The scout ship crashed into the ocean, but Morrison managed to track the pilot's escape pod to a small island. The rescue mission that followed changed everything. The Zephyrian pilot they captured wasn't the divine being humanity had been shown. Stripped of his technological enhancements, he looked almost human, taller, with strange proportions, and that shimmering skin, but clearly biological. When Dr. Chen examined him, the truth began to emerge. His name is Vex, Dr. Chen reported to the Resistance leadership. He's not a god, he's a refugee. The story that emerged over weeks of careful interrogation was nothing like the Zephyrians had claimed. They weren't creators or gardeners of the galaxy. They were survivors of a catastrophic war, the last remnants of a civilization that had been consumed by something they called the Deva, Ours. The Devourers were a hive-mind entity that spread across the galaxy like a plague, consuming entire star systems and converting all matter into extensions of their collective consciousness. The Zephyrians had fled from system to system for thousands of years, always one step ahead of annihilation. We came to your world because we were dying, Vex admitted, his silver eyes showing something Captain Vasquez recognized as shame. Our ships were failing, our people were starving. We needed resources, technology, time to recover. The deception was Kix's idea. He said if we appeared as gods, you would give us everything willingly. Instead of just asking for help, Captain Vasquez said grimly, would you have helped us if we had simply asked? The question haunted her. Would humanity have welcomed desperate refugees, or would they have seen them as invaders? The answer didn't matter now. What mattered was what came next. The Resistance began reverse engineering Zephyrian technology from the crashed scout ship. Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock, dissecting every component and understanding its function. What they discovered changed their entire approach to the conflict. Zephyrian technology wasn't magic. It was physics pushed to its absolute limits. Their power sources used controlled micro-black holes. Their healing technology was nanoscale medical robots. Their gravity manipulation came from understanding space-time at a quantum level. Most importantly, it could all be understood and replicated by human science. We've been thinking about this wrong, Dr. Chen explained to the gathered resistance. Leaders, we've been trying to fight them with conventional weapons, but we should be learning from them, adapting their technology to our needs. The first human-built gravity manipulator was crude, barely functional, and required a nuclear reactor to power it, but it worked. The first batch of medical nanobots saved 3 critically injured resistance fighters. The first quantum communicator allowed instant contact with hidden cells worldwide. Captain Vasquez stood in the Resistance Command Center, watching her people work with technology that had seemed impossible just months before. The Zephyrians had taught humanity something invaluable, even if they hadn't meant to. They had shown them what was possible. How long before we can build a ship? She asked Dr. Chen. 6 months, maybe less, if we can get more Zephyrian components. Then, we get more components. The raids began immediately. Small teams of resistance fighters, equipped with reverse-engineered cloaking devices and gravity weapons, struck at isolated Zephyrian outposts. Each successful mission brought back more technology, more understanding, more capability. The Zephyrians began to notice. Their patrols increased, their security tightened, but they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand. Humans learned differently than other species. Where most civilizations would take centuries to adapt new technology, humans integrated it in months. Where others would worship superior technology, Humans would dissect it and improve upon it. They're adapting too quickly, Kix told his council, unaware that human quantum communicators were intercepting every word. At this rate, they'll match our capabilities within a year. Then we accelerate the harvest, another Zephyrian commander suggested. Take what we need and leave before they become a threat. No, Kix said firmly. We need this world. The Devourers are still out there, still hunting us. If we run now, where do we go next? Captain Vasquez listened to the intercepted communication. With growing understanding, the Zephyrians weren't just refugees. They were refugees with nowhere left to run. Earth was their last hope, and that made them dangerous in a completely different way. The final revelation came when Lieutenant Morrison, now piloting a prototype human Zephyrian hybrid fighter, detected massive energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. The readings were unlike anything in the Zephyrian database, darker and more aggressive. Captain Morrison's voice was tense as he transmitted the data back to base. I think we're about to have bigger problems than fake gods. The Devourers had found Earth. Asterisk. The reckoning, the darkness came not as ships, but as a living shadow that consumed light itself. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the sensor readings with growing horror as the entity known as the Devourers approached the outer planets, Jupiter's. Massive bulk began to dim as something impossible wrapped around it like a hungry mouth. How long do we have? She asked Dr. Chen, who was frantically analyzing the quantum signatures of the approaching threat, based on their consumption rate of Jupiter's mass. Maybe 6 hours before they reach Earth's orbit, he replied, his face pale. Alina, this thing is eating an entire planet. The Zephyrian deception had crumbled the moment their sensors detected the Devourer presence. Kix appeared on every screen across Earth, but this time his divine composure was gone. The silver-eyed alien leader looked terrified, desperate, and entirely too human in his fear. People of Earth, he began, his voice shaking. I must tell you the truth. We are not your gods. We are refugees, and we have brought death to your door. The global response was chaos. Riots erupted in major cities as populations realized they had been worshipping advanced aliens rather than divine beings. Governments that had surrendered their sovereignty demanded explanations. Military forces that had stood down scrambled to reactivate defense systems that would be useless against the approaching threat. But in the Colorado Rockies, the Prometheus project was already moving. Launch the ship, Captain Vasquez ordered. Ready or not, we're out of time. The Prometheus itself was a marvel of human adaptability. Built in 6 months using reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology, it looked nothing like the graceful alien vessels, where Zephyrian ships were flowing works of art. The Prometheus was angular, practical, and distinctly human in its aggressive design. It bristled with hybrid weapon systems, powered by a controlled micro-black hole that Dr. Chen's team had somehow managed to stabilize. Lieutenant Jake Morrison took the pilot's seat, his hands steady on controls that felt familiar despite being based on alien technology. The ship's crew of 12 represented the best of human military science and engineering, each one trained on equipment that hadn't existed a year ago. Prometheus 2 base, Morrison reported as the ship lifted from its hidden launch facility. All systems green, artificial gravity holding steady, quantum drive ready for engagement. As the Prometheus rose through Earth's atmosphere, it was joined by an unexpected escort. 3 Zephyrian ships emerged from their hidden positions, their pilots requesting permission to fly alongside the human vessel. This is Ceph Commander Kix. The alien leader's voice came through the CUM system. Captain Vasquez, we request the honor of fighting beside you. You lied to us for 5 years, Vasquez replied coldly. You made slaves of our people and claimed to be gods. Why should we trust you now? Because, Kix said quietly, you are the first species we have encountered that learned our technology faster than we thought possible. If anyone can find a way to stop the Devourers, it will be humans. The combined fleet reached the outer solar system as the Devourers finished. Consuming Jupiter, what they saw defied comprehension. The massive planet was gone, replaced by a writhing mass of dark matter that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Tendrils of shadow reached toward Mars, already beginning the process of consumption. Scans indicate the entity is composed of converted matter from thousands of worlds, Dr. Chen reported from the Prometheus's science station. It's not just alive, it's a collective consciousness made from everything it's consumed. The Devourers noticed their approach immediately. The shadow mass pulsed, and suddenly space itself seemed to scream. Waves of psychic pressure hammered against the minds of both human and Zephyrian crews, carrying images of countless worlds being consumed, civilizations being absorbed into the collective darkness. Mental shields at maximum, Morrison reported, through gritted teeth. But I can still hear them whispering. The whispers spoke of inevitability, of the futility of resistance. They showed visions of Earth being consumed, its population absorbed into the Devourer collective, but they also revealed something the entity hadn't intended to share. The Devourers had a weakness. They're not truly unified, Dr. Chen realized. Analyzing the psychic emanations, the collective consciousness requires constant communication between all parts. If we could disrupt that communication, we could fragment them, Captain Vasquez finished, turn their greatest strength into a vulnerability. The battle began as the Devourers launched the first attack. Tendrils of living darkness reached across millions of kilometers in seconds, grasping for the small fleet. The Zephyrian ships responded with their traditional energy weapons, beams of coherent light that carved through the shadow matter, but seemed to cause no lasting damage. The Prometheus took a different approach. Firing quantum disruptors, Morrison announced, unleashing weapons that existed at the intersection of human ingenuity and alien technology. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer matter, the disruptors attacked the quantum entanglement that held the collective consciousness together. The effect was immediate and startling. Sections of the shadow mass writhed in apparent confusion, no longer moving in perfect coordination with the whole. For the first time in the entity's existence, parts of it were cut off from the collective mind. It's working, Dr. Chen shouted. The disrupted sections are fighting each other, but the Devourers adapted quickly. The collective consciousness began isolating the disrupted sections, cutting them away like infected tissue. Within minutes, the entity had learned to resist. The quantum disruptors, they're learning from our attacks, Kix observed grimly, just as you learned from our technology. Then we don't give them time to learn, Captain Vasquez replied. She activated the ship's internal communication system, speaking to resistance. Cells across the solar system. All units, initiate protocol, Prometheus. Across the solar system, hidden installations that had been built in secret over the past 6 months suddenly activated. Quantum disruptors built into asteroid mining stations, cloaked weapon platforms orbiting the outer planets, and modified communication satellites all began broadcasting the same disruptive frequency simultaneously. The effect on the was catastrophic. Cut off from millions of communication links at once, the collective consciousness began to fragment into competing subentities. Parts of the shadow mass turned on other parts, fighting for control of the remaining resources. But the victory was temporary. Even fragmented, the Devourers represented an enormous threat. The largest fragment still controlled nearly half of the converted Jupiter mass and was moving toward Earth with single-minded determination. "We need to hit them with everything we have," Captain Vasquez decided. "Morrison, plot a course directly into the center of the largest fragment." "Captain, that's a suicide run," Morrison replied. "Maybe, but it's also the only way to get close enough to deploy the final weapon." The final weapon was Dr. Chen's masterpiece, a device that combined human nuclear technology with Zephyrian quantum manipulation. Instead of destroying matter, it would invert the quantum processes that held the Devourer consciousness together, turning their own absorption abilities against them. The Prometheus dove into the writhing darkness, its hull screaming under the pressure of reality being twisted around it. Zephyrian escort ships provided covering fire, their energy weapons carving a path through the shadow matter. Inside the ship, the crew felt the whispers of billions of consumed minds pressing against their mental shields. "Deploying quantum inversion device," Dr. Chen announced as they reached the core of the fragment. "Detonation in 30 seconds. All ships, clear the area," Captain Vasquez ordered. But as the countdown continued, she realized they wouldn't make it out in time. The Prometheus was trapped in the gravitational field of the collapsing fragment. Captain Kix's voice came through the comm system. "We can get you out, but someone has to stay behind to ensure the device detonates properly." "No," Vasquez replied firmly. "We finish this together." The combined human-Cepharian fleet formed a protective formation around the Prometheus as the quantum inversion device reached critical mass. The weapon didn't explode in the traditional sense. Instead, it created a cascade effect that spread through the Devourer fragment, turning its absorption processes inside out. The fragment began consuming itself, its own matter being converted back into normal space-time. The process spread like wildfire through the remaining Devourer consciousness, each fragment turning on the others in a cascade of self-destruction within hours. The shadow that had consumed Jupiter was gone, leaving behind only normal matter, and the echoes of billions of freed minds. The Prometheus limped back to Earth, its hull scarred but intact. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge, watching her homeworld grow larger in the viewscreen. Beside her, Zeph Commander Kix observed the blue-green planet with something approaching wonder. "Your species learns very quickly," he said quietly. "In 6 months, you went from worshipping us as gods to saving us from extinction." "We never worshipped you," Vasquez replied. "We just played along until we figured out how to fight you." Kix's silver eyes showed what might have been amusement. "And now, Kix's silver eyes showed what might have been amusement. "And now we build something better. No gods, no slaves, just 2 species working together to explore the galaxy." The agreement signed in the weeks that followed established the Solar Confederation, a joint government representing both human and Zephyrian interests. The Zephyrians shared their knowledge freely, helping humanity advance centuries in just years. In return, humans offered something the aliens had never experienced: the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Dr. Chen's research teams worked alongside Zephyrian scientists to develop new technologies that neither species could have created alone. Lieutenant Morrison led the first joint exploration missions to nearby star systems, using ships that combined human engineering pragmatism with Zephyrian artistic elegance. And in the depths of space, Other species detected the quantum signatures of the Devourer defeat. For the first time in galactic history, the shadow that had consumed countless worlds had been stopped. The message spread across interstellar communication networks. A young species called humanity had done the impossible. Captain Alina Vasquez retired from active duty but continued to work with the Solar Confederation's defense forces. She often stood in the observation deck of the new orbital station, watching human and Zephyrian ships launching together on missions of exploration and discovery. They had claimed to be gods, these silver-eyed refugees, but in the end they had taught humanity something far more valuable than worship. They had shown them that the only real divinity was the endless capacity to learn, adapt, and overcome any challenge the universe could present. The stars were waiting, and humanity was finally ready to meet them as equals. Asterisk.